Hola, hola. Buenos dias. Okay, good morning. This is episode 199. It's pretty crazy. 200 is going to be even crazier, but 199, I don't know where that came from. So, buen provecho, cheers. Okay, audio is sounding good. Come on in. It is Friday, February 6th. Hola, mo. Hola. Okay. Um, Where am I at? Okay, let's get oriented. So, what are you up to? Ask a question, send a comment. YouTube seems to be the place where the comments are happening. So, head on over to YouTube, jump in, but also on X/Twitter and Twitch. And these are the freshly minted Salvadoran fur balls in Berlin, El Salvador. And thank you to our cat sitter, Jocelyn, for fostering them and taking care of them and taking them to the vet and getting their shots and dealing with their eye infection and dealing with their vaccination and et cetera, and getting them adopted. The one on the left may become a permanent resident of Berlin, El Salvador, but the other two have been spoken for. And they are quite the handful. Little furry cutie balls there. Okay. Good morning, Ted. May you have few breaches this weekend. Last week, and by that I mean not this week, but the prior week, I did not have a live stream because I was in Texas for the inaugural Vibe 1.0 conference put on by Partner In, Molly and Liz. Awesome. And so I had the privilege of presenting with David Laster. So David and I had chatted about some of the challenges around managed services agreements and how do you um, transition to, from an on-prem model where it's time materials and, um, sorry, got distracted. I don't know what few means, Ted. um, uh, how do you transition to the SaaS world where maybe time materials isn't a good fit, and maybe you want to transition to a subscription service and support model that mimics the SaaS services that you're implementing for your customer. So David Laster prepared a presentation. I just tagged along, and we had a great conversation. Oh, a few breaches. Yes. Let's keep the breaches. Let's go with less than 5 this weekend. How's that sound? Or vulnerabilities. Um, so we had a great conversation. This is one of the earlier sessions, I believe, is on Wednesday, and it was the start of us seeing what is different about the Vibe conference. And when we started talking, we very quickly had a question, and it was fascinating how it unfolded. As a presenter at a conference, the last thing I want is to present and have the audience just sit there in silence, like timid students at a boarding school or something. So we very quickly had a question, we had comments, we had people chiming in with their experiences, and it was fascinating. So it was a really good session where people were sharing what they were doing, what worked for them, what didn't work for them, the challenges they were thinking, taking notes. Amazing session to start off our week. And then, so that's, thank you, Wade, for taking that random photo where I look like I'm, turning into Frankenstein or something. So I apparently got very animated during the presentation, and that's what I looked like. So we were talking about pricing your MSA, and that just really wound me up, apparently. So that was a fantastic session. And then I went back to more normal human mode. And yeah, great session. Really, really different conference. And then I spoke with my partner in crime, Tanya, and we uh, represented a session we had done once before, but I completely rewrote it from scratch. Completely different approach, different slides, different content, different focus. And it was about avoiding $1 million lawsuit, aim for a higher standard of project management. And I took 3 lawsuits, broke down like what are the components that could contribute to these situations where you get yourself into trouble, either, through, you know, messing up, being incompetent, making a mistake, whatever, or through no fault of your own, you just get T-boned by something that you just didn't expect. And out of the blue, you get a lawsuit. And you're like, what? So we talked about that and had a great presentation and very cool. For the second year in a row, or second time in a row, we had someone in the audience who had been through a lawsuit. So last year at Directions, someone was in the process of dealing with a lawsuit. This year, we had someone in attendance who had been through the full implementation, which then led to the lawsuit. And then that person also helped defend the partner against the lawsuit. So this person had the full broad scope and experience with everything that happened from A to Z. So very interesting. I'm hoping to follow up with that person to see if they or the partner would be willing to talk, to kind of share experience, documents, recommendations, anything like that. So yeah, I'm learning a lot just by talking about that. And I think it really surprised people in the room, like what can trigger a lawsuit, how that unfolds, and how problematic and difficult it can be. You don't want to go there, basically. And then we had I had my third presentation, and this was where Tanya and I talked about building a nearshore consulting services and support practice from scratch. Of course, you might have heard me mention once or twice, I don't say it often, talk about El Salvador. And so we talked about everything we had done from the very beginning, how it unfolded, just all the random coincidences, how we pivoted left and right to kind of adapt and make things happen, and just the unbelievable synchronicity of events that came together to bring us where we are today. And got a lot of good feedback about the session, what we're doing. People were pretty amazed. They're like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. Like just all the components that have come together to produce this kind of wild thing that we're doing over there. But a lot of fun, great session. Even the photographer at the conference came up. He's like, wow, that was crazy. And it wasn't really about Business Central or technology per se. It was just this, crazy thing that we had done. So it was relatable to people outside the tech space. So that was really good to hear. And look at all these beautiful people and me. These are a group of some of the MVPs that were at the Vibe conference. And we had a great time, really fantastic time presenting, attending, meeting people. And what was really fantastic about the conference, and which I really like about new conferences that are starting up, some people say, oh, there's only 100 people there. And I say, wow, awesome. There's only 100 people there. You get to sit down and actually have a conversation in peace and quiet and in a relaxed atmosphere without running around and trying to get from one end of the zip code to the other, from one session to another in the conference hall. Really a much more intimate atmosphere. If you are a Microsoft partner of any type, you don't have to be Dynamics, BC, even Power Platform. You could be Azure, you could be data, you name it. Partners of all types were there, and it was really a fantastic, open, intimate, sharing, collaborative conference. Fantastic. You can head on over to my YouTube channel and go to youtube.com/SteveEndo and check out the live streams tab. And Tanya and I did a recap on Saturday or Sunday, I forget, after the conference. So while it's fresh, and we talked about what we did. It was a lot of fun. So I think it's going to be in September 2026, the Vibe 2.0. So come join us in the Vibe Tribe, as we are now called. We are the inaugural Vibe Tribe. Come check it out. Welcome, Brad. Bring your lobster, Brad. Okay, the weekend, El fin de semana. I've had this question a few times, and I don't know if it's me, if it's the person asking the question, but someone asked me, so what else do you do, Steve? You come to these conferences, you present, you talk about BC, like that, you work with BC, but like, tell me about yourself. What else do you do, Steve? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, no, like, what else do you do? I'm like, yeah, what do you mean? I honestly don't know how to answer the question. Because on my Saturday morning, what I'm doing is I'm researching diagram types for business process flows and business data flows. So I grab my cup of coffee, I sit back, and I talk with perplexity about business diagrams. You've got your basic process flow chart or workflow diagram. Then you got your swim lanes, you got your BPMNs, you got your DFDs, and you got your ERs. And that doesn't even get you into UMLs and things like that. But we're just going to keep it simple. And so that's what I do on my Saturday morning. But what do you do on Sunday morning, Steve, after you've geeked out on business process diagrams? Well, on Sunday morning, I brew another cup of coffee and I read a legal presentation by fancy pants lawyers at some conference or something about drafting IT master services agreements. And then I get to this page and I'm like, wait, I'm no lawyer, but I happen to know that this is horrible legal advice for any IT contract, master services agreement, managed service agreement. I happen to know as soon as I saw this sentence, I'm like, wait, these are lawyers? You're joking, right? They're talking about protecting their client, and they have a clause that uses the phrase generally accepted industry standards. This is an absolute landmine. You do not want this in your IT contracts. Trust me, because once an expert witness gets a hold of that phrase, they will absolutely destroy you by citing very well-known, very high-profile, generally accepted industry standards that you will never, ever be able to meet, given the context of the projects that you're working on. That is their job. So I highly recommend not having this phrase in and talking to your lawyer about alternative wording. I don't have a great suggestion yet, but for instance, I have tried to go with generally accepted standards within the Business Central community. I don't know how official and legal that sounds, but I am not competing with rocket launch providers. I am not competing with medical device manufacturers. I am not going to do a 200-page requirements analysis for a PTE. All of those things can be cited by an expert witness to make you look staggeringly incompetent if you have this one sentence in your contract. So don't do it. So that's what I do on a Sunday. And then late Sunday, Ted, you'll appreciate this one. I saw this and I said, wait, what? I use Notepad++, as do a few 100 million people on the planet. It's a great alternative to Notepad in Windows, and it's a free version of the ultimate boss of text editors, Ultra Edit, which I'm a huge fan of. It can't compete with Ultra Edit, but it's a great free quick alternative that's more capable than Notepad. So Notepad++ was hijacked by state-sponsored actors. And it was not, I wouldn't call it malware. Notepad++ itself, the true legitimate Notepad++, apparently was not compromised, but state-sponsored actors infiltrated the hostinger infrastructure that was providing the Notepad++ website or hosting infrastructure. They infiltrated Hostinger. They got access to Notepad++ servers, and they were able to apparently, they watched a guy on YouTube try to speculate about what happened. They speculate that they figured out, they reverse engineered the entire communication chain between the Notepad++ server and certain distribution points for updates. They realized there was an HTTP step in there somewhere. They were able to do I forget what it's called. Basically, they were redirecting that HTTP traffic, doing a man in the middle in order to point users who were updating to a malicious version of the app. Absolutely bonkers. It's basically setting a new standard for intrusion detection and threat analysis. So this is what I did on a Sunday, and I read the Rapid7 report. If you're not familiar with Rapid7, they're kind of an OG in the cybersecurity space. And Rapid7 has dubbed this the chrysalis backdoor, and they have attributed this to a group called Lotus Blossom. So there you go. That's what I do on Sunday. So I don't know what else to tell you, folks. So weekly projects. Partner dashboard, registration dashboard, maintenance service agreements, baby steps there. iSolutions, we are implementing that internally. Dynamics Con planning through the committees. BAI2, my second favorite file format. M365 Exchange mail flow rules. I'd never heard of this before. Teams Planner, slowly, paso a paso, making progress on Teams Planner. SDLC models, geeking out on project management, and the age-old question, PTE versus AppSource app. That's my week. Had the team meeting on Monday morning, then had a demo call for a Dynamics GP customer for the Postmaster product that I still sell and support there. Had a call with iSolutions to walk through that with Ronald, and they provided us with the process of getting iSolutions set up in a sandbox demo tenant. So we are ready to start learning and testing that. We're going to be using iSolutions for adding a electronic payment link to the bottom of our invoices, and that will take the customer to a payment portal where they can pay credit card, EFT, ACH, and we don't have to wait for a check or a separate EFT. And in addition to accepting credit cards, one unexpected benefit is that if the customer chooses to pay by bank transfer, EFT, ACH through the payment portal, whether you use iSolutions or something else, the super nice benefit is that comes through, integrated to BC, creates the payment, applies the payment, and takes care of your bank rec in the process. Whereas if you get a traditional ACH or wire direct to your bank account, one, you got to know what happened, which is a big problem for me because my bank literally does not notify me when I get a payment. It is a pain. Then two, you're staring at this EFT with this cryptic text that doesn't say who sent it or what invoice they're paying, because I do not get CTX or CCD plus remittance info or addendum info in my bank feed because I'm not going to pay the bank more money than I am. And then I got to go manually enter that payment, manually apply it, and then deal with it. So great side effect is even customers who want to pay via EFT or ACH through a payment portal, you get that automatic payment entry, cash apply, and it just makes your life so much easier. Check format and remittance. David found an interesting thing on an RDLC check. Apparently Alyssa had set up the MICR line. It looked great in RDLC. When the customer goes to print, the MICR line is 1/2 inch too high. Well, this is a new thing for us, but apparently there was a border on the report or a margin on the report of say 1/2 inch. And even though the MICR line was present in the correct place and design time in Report Designer, when the margins kicked in, it pushes the MICR line up 1/2 inch in the wrong place on the check. So something we had not encountered before. So that was great. And David in Berlin, El Salvador, figured that out. Dynamics Con BC content. We are meeting as the BC Content Committee to evaluate the, I don't know, 89, couple hundred submissions. I don't even know how many we have. And so we've split off on tracks. We got setup, finance, warehouse, distribution, manufacturing. We have a technical admin track. So we're trying to fill all those sessions. I think we have 60 or 70 sessions for DynamicsCon for BC alone. So pretty impressive. And thanks to everyone who submitted, we got a lot of technical sessions this year, whereas last year it was pretty lean. So we're going to have we're aiming for 22 technical plus admin sessions. That could be technical, it could be dev, it could be semi-technical administration, you name it, all one nice technical admin pile. So looking good so far. Obviously, tons of AI stuff, which we're trying to figure out what to do with that. But yes, looking good for Vegas. I think it's in May coming up. Sales holds application. We're working on this where we evaluate certain criteria, put sales documents on hold, and allow them to be released. So that is underway. And then we had our evening dev call. Whoa. This production intern, you're fired. You're fired. What is this? Okay. There we go. Let's start there. So I had never seen a chart like this. I was just kind of like, wait, that's cool. So this is apparently an AccuWeather chart that shows in the month of February how much each latitude, how much daylight time you gain in February at different latitudes. Really fascinating. And so southern latitude around Texas, you gain 40 minutes. I'm in Los Angeles, so I'm in whatever that band is, 50 minutes. And then as you go north, 60 minutes, 70 minutes, 80 minutes up north. Like, it's pretty wild. I was just staring at this like, wait, really? And I intuitively knew that like as spring comes, the daylight just really slams in quickly and you get much longer days. It's almost like the earth is tilting faster at that time of year, but really interesting representation. First time I'd ever seen it. Dev projects, PTE versus app. This is an ongoing, it's an ongoing discussion where customer says, I want this, I'd like this functionality. And we're looking at it and we're like, okay, is this something we could reuse? Is this something other customers want? And it's like, then the partner will say, oh, this is a great idea. Let's make a product. It'll sell like hotcakes. And I'm like, no, it will not sell like hotcakes. Trust me. And so we're just constantly having to weigh that. But even if, Brad, try going back and forth, north to south. Yes. Even if we say, yeah, there's not much value, we're not going to sell this to more than a couple of customers. Like, even if it's just 2 customers, I'm now debating, do we just go with an AppSource app for this? Because we got all the infrastructure. It's only a little more work for us to push out an AppSource app than a PTE, unlike, many partners who just haven't invested in all the infrastructure. So, yeah, I'd say maybe our criteria is 2 or more customers and we'll go with an AppSource app because then we can more easily push updates. We can more easily check status and stay in contact with that customer. And also, if, depending on the situation, we could potentially just price it. So instead of say $10,000 to update to create this PTE, maybe we go with $2,000 or $2,500 or whatever that price is. And the customer has less capital outlay. We do the work, we put it in AppSource. Hopefully we get 2 or 3 customers and we have ROI after 3 to 4 years. So Eric says, there are 8,400 apps on AppSource. There are 50,000 Business Central customers. It's a bad ratio. Yeah, but our apps are going to be just overnight successes. We only build hotshot apps that just go off the charts. And your app is locked because AppSource doesn't allow breaking changes. Yeah, I mean, but honestly, when we deploy PTEs, we just assume that we're locked in and we got to deal with it. So yeah, fortunately, most of our app source apps are not gargantuan, right? So we're not doing what people have done for decades in the nav world in Europe and now in Business Central, where you have this monstrous app. I don't know if those are in app source, but we tend to have smaller, more focused apps that I think are maintainable. Famous last words, but yeah, the subscription revenue, recurring revenue, more than two customers, maintainability, or having new releases. So yes, you can always do force update on a PT, but we as a rule don't do that. So fortunately, we've never really had to, but who knows? We'll see what the future has in store for us. What do we got going on? Oh, my favorite Microsoft product. Say it with me. Azure Front Door. Now, on the one hand, I empathize with the Microsoft Azure Front Door team. I'm sure they're exceptionally smart engineers and people who are maintaining that, and they're, you know, 6 PhDs ahead of me. But boy, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Now, in this particular case, this was a Business Central customer. So I don't know that Azure Front Door itself is to blame, but when you see Azure Front Door, it's like I'm now triggered to just assume it's down again. The service behind this page isn't responding to Azure Front Door. This would seem to imply that it's not Azure Front Door. It's saying, hey, I'm not getting a response. So something in the BC infrastructure, something between Azure Front Door to BC is having a problem. But anytime I see the phrase Azure Front Door, there's a problem. I just got to go with the B52s and Love Shack. Bang, bang, bang on the door, baby. Yep. How come we never hear about the back door breaking? Doo-doo. Yeah, Brad will be here all week. Thanks. Okay, and then we had the separate track meeting to Tanya and I are responsible now for the BC Tech track for DynamicsCon. So we did our second pass of those sessions to kind of weed out the spam, select the ones we want, and just in terms of topic. And then now we have the arduous task of figuring out how to follow our rules for DynamicsCon, no more than 2 sessions per speaker. And I think it's 2 sessions per partner ISV or organization. So that starts to get pretty tricky. And then we have a lot of sessions this year for what we might call cross product, or they're not BC specific. So it's like how to manage an implementation successfully. And you could insert the word Business Central in the title once, but really all the content, it's project management. It's not ERP specific. It's not BC specific. So yes, Ted, this is the B52s. That is Love Shack. Knock a little louder, baby. I can't hear you. One of my favorite songs. So, yep. This is an OG photo from their music video. There were newer photos, but it kind of makes me sad to see my favorite performers in present day. They have aged about as well as I have. So, and then this. This is a fun little Azure. I love the word landmine. It's an Azure landmine. And this almost seems intentionally engineered. So I don't know if you can spot anything in this chart. It's probably really, really subtle. I don't know if it comes through on video. I know you'll have to squint and zoom in really hard to see what might be different. Something changed in this chart. This is a graph of cost of one of our Azure tenants where we have some production things going on. Now, up until January 26, we had 6 separate Azure functions deployed in this production environment. 6. You might notice something happened on January 27th. Um, well, it turns out that we deployed, by we, I mean my developer, deployed a new Azure function in our production Azure environment. And I started, after a few days, I got an alert. You're consuming more budget than normal. You're going to hit $25. You're going to hit $30. I'm like, wait, we've never had these alerts before. What's going on? Then when we hit $40, I'm like, wait, what's going on? So my developer looked into it and he sent me this. Turns out Microsoft has has made a change in Visual Studio. So if you attempt to deploy a new Azure function from within Visual Studio, you have the option to choose the Azure Function Consumption Plan. So do you want fancy pants, low latency, high availability, super fast, everything is hot all the time? Or do you want the low cost, super budget, like higher latency, 5-second startup, you only use it occasionally, kind of cold Azure function? Well, it turns out they hid and removed the lowest cost plan in Visual Studio. So when you build your Azure function, you go to deploy it, Visual Studio says, oh, would you like me to help you deploy it? You say, sure. You deploy it choosing what you think is the lowest cost plan, and that plan is called Flex Consumption. And you think, oh, well, the old one was consumption. This is flex consumption. That sounds pretty economical. Aha, it is not. Flex consumption is significantly higher specification, higher requirements, higher capabilities, and it is staggeringly more expensive than the consumption plan. So you'll notice the earlier days in January, those are about, I'm going to guess, 70 cents a day. Once you see those blue bars kick up, that's like $3.25 or something like that, $3.75 per day. Basically, by having one idle Azure function, completely idle, never used, in the flex consumption plan, you will be spending $75 a month for that one Azure function. And we have 6 of them. Fortunately, we have been using Azure functions for long enough to know we have a problem here, and then to realize this new Azure function is different than the rest, and then my developer found the cause of this. So I'm assuming Microsoft did not do that accidentally. Nice of them, right? So there are a lot of corporations who are spending $75 a month on idle Azure functions, and Microsoft is loving it. Wednesday, Miraculous. I attended a cybersecurity webinar by Anti-Siphon Training talking about M365 Exchange mail flow rules. And I was like, wait, what is a mail flow rule? This is where you go into admin exchange Microsoft.com and you go into these rules to basically, when an email comes in, you can specify criteria to perform certain evaluations, actions, modifications, whatever you want. All sorts of crazy things you can do with this. You can block certain domains. You can allow certain domains. You can block certain patterns in the email. I barely understand it. So my initial test was like, hey, I'm going to put the message in here. I don't know if this is useful or not, but I'm just going to do this as a test that says this email is from an external sender. So the external sender warning, right, which probably 100% of people ignore. So I was able to go in there and using a little help from Perplexity on what options are available for this and how it's configured, I was able to add this to our Exchange email. So now everyone sees this message when a message comes in from an external sender. So that's the type of thing you can do with Exchange mail flow rules. So that was pretty cool. And BC MEM integrations, we are going to have a call with a customer who uses MEM, and they use Bill.com. They use something called Tally, and they have a regional bank that they use. And at the moment, all 3 of those services do not support BC with MEM. Some, I think, one of them has an integration with BC, no MEM support. I don't know whether the other 2 have any MEM support. So That's the type of thing we're getting into. We already developed a Bill.com MEM integration, so we're going to see if the customer wants that. And then I don't know about Tally or the regional bank. That gets a little trickier. So we're going to figure that out. Teams Planner. I continue to slowly learn about Teams Planner. This is an example of a sample software development plan using their templates. But next bullet point, SDLC models and phases. Like, is this Teams Planner template, does it follow the standard of SDLC models? Do I want to use SDLC models and phases? I don't know. We're kind of this semi agile, semi waterfall because customers want prices. But fortunately, our projects are small enough where we don't have this 3-month waterfall thing we got to follow. So we might be able to pull off agile or some hybrid. So I'm looking into that. So what do you do in your free time, Steve? This is what I do. Sorry, had a cold all week following the conference. Dynamics Con Planning. Had another planning meeting with the Greater Dynamics Con Planning Committee to discuss how we're going to proceed. I made some updates to our contracts. I wanted to make sure that we had a clause dealing with responsibility, risk, exposure, make the customer aware of the potential issues of working with third parties, ISV solutions, third-party SaaS platforms, APIs, you name it. And turns out there's a lot of issues. Like, what if the API goes down? What if you get 98% of the way through the project and you realize the API does not support a critical feature that your customer wants to have? Not that I would know anything about that. So these are the things that I added to the contract. I don't know how legally helpful they'll be in a dispute, but at least I pointed it out and emphasized it. If nothing else, it tries to communicate that topic or that point to the customer who may not realize it. Teams NDI. Thank you, Brad, for being my guinea pig and helping me get Teams NDI working for now, tentatively, maybe, hopefully. I have spent like 2 years trying to get NDI working properly on Teams, and I got it configured. I figured that out. That's a nightmare, but I have it configured, but it would work very intermittently, very unreliably. But I think I finally figured out one final trick that made it work, and we did a nice test. So thanks to that. Thanks to Brad for that. And I got a new toy. This is my $189 eBay special. It is absolutely beat like it was thrown around the back of a truck, and it works perfectly fine because this is a Lenovo ThinkCenter Tiny PC. It's a Core i7. It is a 6th generation Core i7. It was manufactured in 2018, but it works perfectly fine. And guess what? Core i7, 6th generation, 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gig NVMe drive. It consumes 4 watts at idle with Linux. So these things are awesome. And how do I know? I've got a stack. So this is my new data center. I'm decommissioning my full-size PC servers, and this is my new data center. So I've got some servers here. I got my Pi-hole running on this. I have my aspirational Cloud Secure Edge access tier server. I have my development server. It's a Windows 11 box. Literally, that's what I do my dev on. I RDP into it and pull up VS Code, pull up Cursor, pull up Claude, do whatever I need, and it works perfectly fine. And my new one in there, and then I've got a maybe a Claude bot. Little skeptical on that now. May not proceed with that, but yeah. So that's where I'm going. So I just picked one up while other people are complaining about RAM prices and CPU shortages, and I'm just like buying a $189 PC off of eBay and stacking them up. Upcoming events, Directions NA, April 27th through 29th in Orlando, and I think I submitted one or two sessions there, but I've not heard on that. I don't know when they're doing their session selection, so I don't know if I'll be attending. Need to figure that out. Dynamics Con is May 12th through 15th in Las Vegas. I do have two or three session submissions there. So I will likely be attending, and since it's in Vegas, it's in my neck of the woods. And Directions Asia is the exact same time as Dynamics Con, so I cannot join my partner in crime over in Vietnam. Tanya is planning on going there, and I stared at this logo last night, and I'm like, Directions HCMC. I'm like, what? What does that even mean? Is that like new branding? Did Directions for Partners like change their name or incorporate with someone? No. Do you know what that stands for? It took me a while. I'm a little slow. That is Directions Ho Chi Minh City. I didn't realize that. I was like, what in the world is HCMC? So anyway, head on over to Vietnam to attend Directions Asia. Then Dynamics Minds is May 25th through 27th in Slovenia. And I have been told by everyone that that is the best conference in the world. It's just the coolest, hippest, great vibe, great atmosphere, great content. It's the party of conferences, I'm told. Thursday, Jueves, stack trace analysis and perplexity. So this is pretty cool. I have been looking at these .NET stack traces for 15 years to support our Dynamics GP on-prem ISV solution. So I'm generally fairly good at like scanning and saying, oh, okay, this is a SQL connection execution timeout. I know what that is. So I can tell the customer, well, it means that it tried to connect your SQL server, it issued a query, and it timed out. But I was never able to, I never took the time to tell exactly which event or which query timed out. So I'm like, okay, I'm just not seeing it. So I pasted this into Perplexity, and without knowing what the application is, it broke down exactly what was happening. And my jaw was slack-jawed. I was like, wait, what? So it says, walking down the stack from the bottom, the controller is doing work, the background process is doing some periodic work. That includes pre-polling routine that calls the database, and that routine issued a SQL command that does not return rows, and that's where your timeout occurred. Wow. I was just blown away by this. And it's right there, but if you've ever seen a full .NET stack trace, it's just like, even I get kind of dizzy reading it. It was really hard to see that it was the pre-polling event that caused it. I'm like, I know exactly what that is. So I told this customer, go check your pre-polling store procedure. Do you have custom SQL in there? And could that be, having a lock or a block and causing a timeout? So I'll see if that was helpful. And I am getting quite rusty with my SQL. So I am having to research apparently a 13 plus year old bug, 13, 14-year-old bug. And boy, I had to dig into GP SQL, and I'm like, whoa, it's just like having to tear your brain out of the present and shove it back in the past and decipher hieroglyphics on the cave wall. It's pretty challenging because I got to stop everything I'm doing, clear my brain buffer, and reload context for this old school on-prem stuff. And it is challenging and very, very tedious to figure out what's going on with this particular bug. New app PRD. So yesterday had a call and talking with a colleague, like, yep, let's bang out this new app. Let's build an app for Business Central. Let's vibe code it because we need 8,002 apps in AppSource for Business Central. I mean, who's with me, right? So I said, hold your horses. Let's not vibe code the actual application yet. Let's get a little structured. And so my friend is a little new on the vibe code scene and the BC dev scene. So I said, okay, let me get started. Let me create some prompts and let me get a PRD kicked off. So I did a fairly long prompt. I just hand wrote it, passed it into Opus 4.5 in Cursor, discussed features and design, said, hey, give me a Markdown PRD. And it blasted out this fairly good PRD. And I said, hey, I want some wireframes. As you may know, those of you who've seen my AL Vibe coding series, you can get some awesome low fidelity, medium fidelity, and high fidelity SVG wireframes of Business Central pages. So I asked for medium fidelity. Opus does a great job out of the box. It's the best one I've tried so far, 4.5 at least. And yeah, so it created wireframes. And then I played around with, okay, I've got SVG in line in my Markdown file, but I want to go to Word. Turns out no easy way to convert that to Word and retain the images. So I'm now working through a process where I'm going to do my wireframes separately, convert them to PNG using some other conversion library. And by me, I mean the agent. I'm not actually doing anything, of course. So then I have my Markdown file that can reference the PNGs, and Pandoc is a utility that can convert Markdown with embedded PNGs into a Word document with inline images. It worked pretty slick. So in like an hour, hour and a half, I sent a full PRD to my friend. He's going to evaluate it. And he's like, wow. That's all he said. He just said, wow. And I said, I absolutely agree with you. Wow. So that's a solid 40 hours of design work in an hour and a half. Oh, okay. Production intern, you're fired. Okay. So cyber updates. Little fun here. So on the Notepad++ thing, Rapid7 started with the analysis and IOCs, indications or indicators of compromise. And they reverse engineered what was going on, found the malware, found the DLL side loading, and the toolkits being used by the threat actors. And this person, Georgy Kucherin, he did a little more analysis, and he says there are many more payloads used in Notepad++ attack. And so this is very interesting. It turns out that the threat actor changed their payload and changed their attack vectors monthly. So from November through January, the threat actors changed their attack structure completely, something that apparently is very, very unheard of in this nerdy cybersecurity world. And so they've tracked down the IP addresses, they've tracked down the C2 commands, and they're really geeking out over all of the execution change, all the tool sets, all the techniques and tactics, TTPs, used by these threat actors. And it came to light, someone tracked down this article, December 2nd, 2025, by Kevin Beaumont. And if you're not familiar with Kevin Beaumont, he is like an OG of, I guess he's a security researcher, but for whatever reason, he is the guy who is finding out about these things before anyone else knows about them. And he finds out about them, realizes a compromise, does the analysis, and announces it to the world. And he has done this so many times, it's wild how he knows about this. And so he says he's heard from 3 orgs now, and this is in December 2nd, who've had security incidents on boxes with Notepad++ installed. Now think about that. Think about how much garbage is installed on your typical machine. And for some company to identify an issue, narrow it down to Notepad++ and realize there's something weird going on, that alone is phenomenal. And then they found that Notepad++ processes have spawned the initial access. Like incredible forensics to have figured this out. Like hats off to those orgs. They've got their act together, right? And this was December 2nd, 2 full months ago, less than a month after the Notepad++ compromise occurred. It's unclear what is happening, and this blog is not to blame the developer of Notepad++. It's just more to raise awareness. And so he didn't know what was going on at this point, but he clearly was on the scent of a problem there. And so he then goes on to break down some of the symptoms and what he's seen. And so once again, he identifies this before anyone else in the world knew what was going on. And Matthew Green is I think he's a professor or something at MIT, does cryptography and encryption. And he's digging into a lawsuit against WhatsApp. And like, I don't know what the lawsuit is about. We don't really know, but there are claims being made that unsubstantiated in the lawsuit, but claims that WhatsApp, despite their claim of end-to-end encryption, they claim that internal WhatsApp employees and engineering team are able to instantly get access to any and all messages and anything put on the WhatsApp platform by any user at any time. And so you ad hoc say, hey, I need access to Sally Smith's WhatsApp, and boom, they have access, which should not be possible if true end-to-end encryption is being used, like what Meta and WhatsApp claim, is my understanding. And then interestingly, apparently this access applies across all Meta properties. So WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, whatever else Facebook does. So he and other security researchers and cryptographers are interested in this because they don't see how these claims could be true. But if they are true and the lawsuit is valid, they're going to be very interested in how this was achieved. And maybe it's a second private key that was used to simultaneously encrypt the messages, and they're basically backdooring the accounts. I don't know, but interesting there. And then Microsoft actually does something useful. This is a long-running saga. If you're familiar with Sysmon, this is part of the sysinternals toolkit. Sysmon is a great utility that allows you to monitor and log activity in excruciating detail on Windows, and it dumps all this stuff in a Windows event log. And so it's great for forensic purposes. Not necessarily so great for live detection, but certainly in a post-mortem or a post-breach audit or analysis, having the Sysmon functionality can certainly help with the analysis and deciphering and figuring out how the breach occurred, how lateral movement occurred, and things like that in a cybersecurity forensic investigation. So apparently Sysmon is now going to become part of Windows, and hopefully it's enabled and not just installed. That's kind of half the battle as well. So that was very good news. Friday, Viernes, that's today. I am going to learn a little bit more about agentic diagramming. You may know that I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to business process diagramming. So I am going to partner up with something to learn a little bit more about how we can combine diagramming tools with AI agents. And I'm going to dub this agentic diagramming. So I do not want to go into Draw.io and manually draw out a process flow diagram. I've done that in Visio back in the Stone Ages. I've done it in PowerPoint now because it's much easier. But now there are all sorts of online diagramming tools that are really cool, really simple and free. And I won't call them industry standards, but they're so accessible that they become a de facto standard, and there are many of them. But what I want to do is I want to say, and my cohort in this project, we want to say, hey, Fancy Pants AI agent, I want you to take these notes. I want you to do a process flow diagram or an entity relationship diagram or whatever other diagram you need. I want you to produce the text metadata or whatever you call it for the diagram so that I paste it in this tool and it renders the image of the diagram. So that's what adventure I'm going on. So I initially said, well, I looked at several. I was aware of Mermaid, did that before. It's actually pretty cool, but it's a little unpredictable. The results are kind of messy and it's kind of hard to wrangle it into a format that is visually coherent and fits on a page. It's surprisingly challenging. So like I'm on the fence on Mermaid. It looks cool on the surface, but once you try to use it, it's a bit of a hairy mess. And then last night, I realized that Mermaid has some key limitations, some really hard limitations. It just can't do things reliably in certain diagrams. So the learning is going well, and it's also related to kind of unpredictability of Mermaid. There is something I've learned, never heard of before, called Plant UML. And this apparently is a diagramming syntax, diagramming standard based on an open source diagramming engine. And it looks like a very simple syntax, even simpler potentially than Mermaid. And you can do what are called, I guess, hard pin diagrams, where you say, this has to be here, then this has to be here, then this has to be here. Whereas Mermaid just kind of jumbles it around on the fly. So Plant UML looks promising. It doesn't look quite as pretty on the basic examples I've seen as Mermaid, but it really nails the hard pin diagrams. Like perfect, just absolutely kills it. So I'm kind of leaning towards Plant UML, and now my effort will be put into, okay, can we clean this up, make this better looking, make it look a little more refined so it didn't come off of a Commodore 64. Then I have a partner call, talking with someone, I believe out of Mexico, who does Power Platform and Copilot Studio. He was at Vibe Conference, so catch up with him, understand his services and offerings better. Then I have a customer call where we're going to talk about something, Bill.com MEM integration. Yes. So yeah, that's some learning on diagrams. So this was what I geeked out over the weekend, my DFD, ER, BPMNs. And then, because I'm a uber geek, I pulled up the BABOK, the Business Analyst Body of Knowledge book, which every one of you certainly has. And I did some research on what BABOK thinks of business analysis diagrams. And it's a little more on the academic side, where they just kind of demonstrate the concept of diagrams, and they have some formal language about what you could use them for and what the proper nomenclature is in the BABOK world. And that is an example of Mermaid. So that's a Mermaid diagram of a flow chart. So nice looking, right? Let me see if I can scoot that over. Friday. Okay. Oops. Okay, let's try that again. There's BABOK. So there is Mermaid. So Mermaid looks cool. It's got the dark mode, right? Like all the cool kids are flocking to it. And the diagrams look good in this simple thing. But once you get a much more complex diagram, like the boxes are random and the lines are random, and it becomes unwieldy. Like it seems like you can't control position and hard pin things like you can in Plant UML. So this is where Plant UML comes in. Mermaid cannot do this. So very cool to learn this. And Plant UML just easy peasy breezy, just bangs this out all day. Remarkably simple syntax for Plant UML to achieve this 6-lane swim diagram. Swim lane diagram. And then that's an example of Plant UML flow diagram. Also very impressive. So what I'd like to do is see if I can pretty this up, add some color, change some borders, whatever, and control sizing and things like that. So looking promising. Summit NA roadshows are coming up. Tampa, DC, Atlanta, Houston, Seattle, Vancouver. Double check your dates if you want to go. And then DynamicsCon Regional 2026, Vancouver, Denver, Toronto, Ghana, and Columbus. Double check the dates. Excellence update. We have Jocelyn is doing more financial reports. She's doing an awesome job doing the trial balance. She's doing the balance sheet. She's doing the income statement, finding all the discrepancies in the reports so that the customers can go back and fix their data or give us a new data load. And she is also diligently studying for MB800, as is David. They've studied the curriculum, they have studied the labs, and they are going to move on to the sample questions from study guides or whatever to just get familiar with what questions are on the exam. So hopefully they'll be ready to take those certification exams by the end of the month, and we'll get it scheduled. And David is also digging into Simple Object Designer. He's become quite the expert in the SOD realm, implementing some new stuff for Tanya for a customer. And then he's the one who figured out the RDL check margins that was causing the issue with the microline. Ronald is helping deploy the partner dashboard. We did an initial release, found a bug, did a subsequent second release, and hopefully we have maybe today, if not early next week, we'll have that live. And then he is going to be doing his second Continia implementation soon. We have that customer ready, and he's helping implement iSolutions internally. Franklin is working on our new Sales Hold app, and he's doing a full refactor of that app based on. So interesting, he was working on the app, doing an analysis, doing testing, debugging, had a conversation. He's just totally comfortable having a chat and having a conversation with the agent to review and discuss the code. And the agent said, by the way, what you're doing here is different than the standard BC process workflow. And he's like, what? Tell me more. So it lays out what we're doing in this app, or what we had requested to do in this app, and it lays out how Business Central normally handles it. And it points out the pros and cons to each approach. So he says, Steve, let's talk about this. So we have a call, we review it, and we both realize what the agent pointed out would simplify our app by at least 50%. Like, it removed entire layers of significant complexity that were giving us headaches. Phenomenal. And we just would never have known. Like, we would not have thought to ask the questions, to challenge the requirements and the design given the information that we were given. And once we thought about it, we're like, oh my gosh, it just proposed a full refactor and redesign of our application to get rid of at least 50% of the complexity. So I then talked to Tanya about this, and she says, yeah, that makes total sense. And she too had not considered approaching it from this same angle, given the environment of the customer and how they were working with this. So now that we know this, we put the new design elements into the agent with the old SOW, and it had it create a full new PRD with this new design. And now he's going to redevelop it or refactor the app with this new design. So pretty phenomenal that the AI is pointing out design issues that three people we would not have even thought of it. We were just completely blind to the possibility of approaching the problem from that direction, despite our knowledge of Business Central. It was really fascinating. Fatima is continuing her PMP learning and practicing. I mentioned SDLC, so she's doing a little studying of software development lifecycle to help me out on finding our SDLC model and project plan and how we're going to approach that and start to use Teams Planner. And then she is scheduling and organizing our first El Salvador Doug meetup February 12th. So it's a little short notice, but we're hoping to pull it together, because if we don't, it's going to be another month until we do. And with that, Q&A. What are you guys up to? What are you working on? What are you going to be geeking out on this weekend? What else do you do, Steve? Well, I watched these two YouTube videos recently. Both were fascinating. One was on the world's largest vinyl factory, and it's out of Eastern Europe, Czech Republic. I'm not sure where, Czechia. I forget where it was, but you would never know. But this small country in Europe has become the largest vinyl record producer in the world by far. No contest. They are like, just multiples larger than any other competing vinyl manufacturer. And apparently they're quite good, because they retained all of their vinyl pressing technology and vinyl production technology throughout the years, despite the massive downturn. They thought they were going to go out of business, but there's been a resurgence in vinyl. And they actually invested and innovated and have entirely new proprietary processes, techniques, equipment, decades of experience internally among their employees, and they're absolutely killing it. And the statistics that this Business Insider video offered is that vinyl is, if I recall correctly, by far, like orders of magnitude, the largest selling physical music media in the world. So CDs are dead and whatever other physical media that might exist for music, vinyl is just the absolute king. Absolutely wild, right? That one of the oldest technologies for recorded audio is finally having this great resurgence and having a comeback. And they showed just the super cool colors they're able to do now. The manufacturing techniques are amazing, the great cover art. And they estimated, 80% of vinyl albums that are sold never get used. They never, a needle never touches the record because they're more collector's editions than anything else. So makes me want to go get a turntable, but I don't want to get a turntable and do not need to collect anything else in my life. And then the second one is a keyboard. I went on a keyboard side journey, side quest. This is a keyboard made in Japan entirely of wood, and it is this excruciatingly handcrafted walnut keyboard where the outer case and every single one of the keys is just exquisitely crafted and laser engraved walnut. I don't know how well it works or how nice it is, but it looks pretty fancy. So, with that, and then we have the three Salvadoran fuzzballs. They had their first vet visit yesterday to get vitamins and treatment and vaccination and inspection. And unfortunately, they have eye infections. So they need to be treated with that before they can get the critical vaccination for some type of feline disease that is rampant in El Salvador. So thank you, Jocelyn, for taking care of the kitties. They are cute fur balls. So have a good weekend. Que tengas un buen fin de semana. And adios. Nos vemos. Have a good one.